Last time, not last time, but several weeks ago, about a month ago, we talked a little bit about ants. And Patrick sent me an email with the ant thing again, and I thought it was kind of cool. And then I got to thinking, does this apply to what I'm talking about now? And the answer is, it actually does apply. And so, we'll speak of the devil. It actually does apply, and I think that this could actually spark some discussion here. So anyway, just review. This is about maybe a 5-minute clip.
Incredibly, 80% of all insects live in jungles. Few are more successful than the ants. There can be 8 million individuals in a single hectare. But jungle ants don't have it all their own way. These bullet ants are showing some worrying symptoms. Spores from a parasitic fungus called cordyceps have infiltrated their bodies and their minds. Its infected brain directs this ant upwards. Then, utterly disorientated, it grips a stem with its mandibles. Those afflicted that are discovered by the workers are quickly taken away and dumped far away from the colony. It seems extreme, but this is the reason why. Like something out of science fiction, the fruiting body of the cordyceps erupts from the ant's head. It can take 3 weeks to grow, and when finished, the deadly spores will burst from its tip. Then any ant in the vicinity will be in serious risk of death. The fungus is so virulent it can wipe out whole colonies of ants. And it's not just ants that fall victim to this killer. There are literally thousands of different types of cordyceps fungi, and remarkably, each specializes on just one species. But these attacks do have a positive effect on the jungle's diversity, since parasites like these stop any one group of animal getting the upper hand. The more numerous a species becomes, the more likely it will be attacked by its nemesis, a cordyceps fungus.
Is the worker ant? Now think about the situation. I mean, it really does. And when I first saw that, it's hard to believe that there is this thing. It's kind of cool. I mean, in one sense, okay. But it's like something out of a science fiction movie. It really is. They breathe in this spore, and then when they breathe it, it goes to their brain. And first of all, it makes a specific behavior. It makes them climb upwards. Okay, and then they start doing really crazy things, and they climb upwards. Well, the other ants, they see them going, hey, I recognize he's climbing up for no reason, and he's acting weird, so he's got that spory thing, okay? And that's kind of scary. And so they pick him up, and they take him away. They just give him a ride. There you go. They drop him off somewhere far away, and they, lose your. He's so demented, he can't help himself, And so they drop him off. He dies, and then this thing eats his brain and consumes his body while this thing grows out of his head, all right? Now, the worker ant who's looking at this, is the worker ant exercising wisdom? That's the question that I put to you.
No.
Okay, you say no. Why do you say that?
Because wisdom is to know the will of God.
What?
Well, I guess, the will of God, it's for human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Wisdom is for human beings.
Wisdom is for human beings?
Yeah, and it means to know the will of God.
Okay. And a means to know the will of God.
Well, I was reading a scripture recently that it says
Okay, all right, very good.
Well, as far as ants go, he's infected. Get him as far away from everybody as you can. Throw off. He's gone anyway.
Okay, so you're saying that the behavior
So he doesn't infect the rest.
Okay, the behavior is logical. It's a wise behavior because by quarantining the infected ant, you're working for the overall good of the colony, and therefore it is wise. Okay. All right. Now, when it comes to ants, we talked about emergent systems a while ago, specifically with regard to the ant colony. When you get ants together, for example, they automatically, they start building a colony. And they'll have a central living chamber, and then they'll have a cemetery, and then they'll have a waste dump, and they'll make the waste dump as far away from the cemetery as they could get it. Okay, and you think these are all very practical, wise things. But ants have very small brains. They aren't taught anything. You don't have big ants teaching little ants how to do stuff. It's not like that. It doesn't work that way. They just know. It is completely instinct. Now, wisdom, with regard to, you could say that what they do is very wise. In fact, everyone who said that what they're doing is a wise thing, you weren't wrong. It is a wise thing because we think of in a general sense, when we think of wisdom, most definitions of wisdom have to do with outcomes. You're doing behavior A to avoid consequence B, or to achieve X. Right? There is a goal in mind. You are doing a behavior for avoiding this and getting this. It is goal-directed. Wisdom is living in a way to avoid calamity and achieve prosperity, spiritually, mentally, physically, in every way. Okay, that's what, in a general sense, that's what wisdom is. So animals can do wise things. All right? It doesn't mean that they're exercising biblical wisdom, though, because from a biblical standpoint, wisdom involves some cognition. Yeah.
Animals are just doing instinct. Whoever programmed them shows wisdom.
Yes. You'd say that the programmer was exercising wisdom when he built that in, because if the programmer wanted them to stay alive, he put these in there to protect them. And I would agree with that. I would say, yes, clearly the programmer would get more credit than the creature in this particular case, because the creature doesn't have much of a sense.
God?
See, whoever else made ants, could have been God, could have been, let me think, who else could have did that? Yeah. Yeah.
That's just the beauty of nature, that God created in such a manner that different species will protect their own, even if it means making a sacrifice.
Well, it is. You are absolutely right. It's like this is God's artwork, and that's one of the problems with atheistic evolution, with those who say that life could just arise on its own. That is it's just amazing. You take a look at the complexity and the harmony here. You think, well, this is a nightmare. Why would God? Didn't you feel sorry for that poor ant? This poor little ant attacked by this evil cordyceps fungus. Ooh, that's like wicked. Why would God? That devil did that, right? No, God did that, okay? There's a reason cordyceps. I kind of like cordyceps. Cordyceps is cool, all right? Because if I had 1 billion ants coming at me, I want cordyceps to help. Oh, hey, kill these ants, all right? There's too many of them. And in fact, if I would have continued on in that video, what we would have noticed, or what they would talk about, is the fact that when insect populations get too large, the larger the insect population, the greater likelihood that somebody's going to catch a cordyceps fungus. And that will then bring that whole population under control. That's why, 90% of the insects live in jungles. 90% of the insects on Earth live in jungles. And you remember back in the 60s, I don't know if you guys remember the 60s, okay? And there'd be occasionally in Africa, there'd be like all of a sudden these killer ants would go on the rampages, right? And they would eat everything in their path, and there'd be famines. Entire countries that have famines because of ants, all right? Cordyceps is useful. When ant populations get too large, they eat everything and can cause famine. The same thing with grasshoppers. Locusts have been doing that. Locusts got their cordyceps too. A different strain of cordyceps, but they do. When these populations get too large, we have a checks and balances here. And so this is harmony. This is harmony. All right? Again, it says something about God's intelligence and his artwork, because it's kind of neat to watch. All right. Now, I'm going to look at, today we're going to look at Proverbs chapter 1, verses 20 through 33. And we're going to look at it in two different Bibles. We're going to look at the Message and take a look at the NIV. And I want you to get I just want you to get the flavor of this. We'll just listen to it first, and then we'll go through and study it a little bit in more detail. Oops, let me go back. Lady Wisdom goes out in the street and shouts. At the town center, she makes her speech. In the middle of traffic, she takes her stand. At the busiest corner, she calls out.
Simpletons, how long will you wallow in ignorance? Cynics, how long will you feed your cynicism? Idiots, how long will you refuse to learn? About face, I can revise your life. Look, I'm ready to pour out my spirit on you. I'm ready to tell you all I know. As it is, I've called, but you've turned a deaf ear. I've reached out to you, but you've ignored me. Since you laugh at my counsel and make a joke of my advice, how can I take you seriously? I'll turn the tables and joke about your troubles. What if the roof falls in and your whole life goes to pieces? What if catastrophe strikes and there's nothing to show for your life but rubble and ashes? You'll need me then. You'll call for me, but don't expect an answer. No matter how hard you look, you won't find me. Because you hated knowledge and had nothing to do with the fear of God. Because you wouldn't take my advice and brushed aside all my offers to train you. Well, you've made your bed. Now lie in it. You wanted your own way? Now how do you like it? Don't you see what happens, you simpletons, you idiots? Carelessness kills. Complacency is murder. First, pay attention to me, and then relax. Now you can take it easy. You're in good hands.
Okay. Now, when you look at that, what is your gut feeling about this Lady Wisdom? What does she seem like? How would you describe her? Loud? Well, she's yelling, man. So she's got to be loud. Yeah. Okay. So loud and is. Do you think everybody can hear at some point in their lives?
You don't have ears.
If you don't have ears. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Well, it's portraying it as though she's noticeable.
Okay.
And you have to go out of your way to ignore. And that you don't get one chance, there's many.
Okay.
And then you are the one that has to actively say, that's trouble for me right now. And then there's a time element involved, and then you're in trouble if you haven't listened.
Okay. So that basically everybody kind of has. It is available to everybody. I mean, the bottom line is that everybody has some sense of what wisdom is. When it comes to the foolish thing and the wise thing, we see it. It speaks to us. But the masses follow the foolish way. And you mentioned the time element. It's like after a while, you keep making choices and keep making choices that are not wise, and then there's calamity. And what is wisdom's attitude when you ignore wisdom and then you fall into calamity? What is wisdom's attitude then? Yeah. It's not very caring. It's not very kind. It's not very kind. It's like, you idiot. See, I told you. You think I'm going to help you now? Forget you. I'm not helping you. You didn't listen to me. That's what you got. All right? Yeah. Wisdom is definitely a warning, saying, do this, and things will go well. If you don't, things will go bad. And if things go bad, you know. Now let's take a look at it in another one. This is just, I'll just read this. This is from the NLT, New Living Translation. Okay, it says it a little bit differently, but you get the flavor again. Wisdom shouts in the street. She cries out in the public square. She calls out to the crowds along the main street and to those in front of City Hall. You simpleton, she cries. How long will you go on being simple-minded? How long will you mockers relish your mocking? How long will you fools fight the facts? Come here and listen to me. I'll pour out the spirit of wisdom upon you and make you wise. I called you so often, but you didn't come. I reached out to you, but you paid no attention. You ignored my advice, rejected the correction I offered. So I will laugh at you when you are in trouble. I will mock you when disaster overtakes you. When calamity overcomes you like a storm, when you are engulfed by trouble, and when you anguish and distress overwhelm you, I will not answer when they cry for help. Even though they anxiously search for me, they will not find me. For they hated knowledge and chose not to fear the Lord. They rejected my advice and paid no attention when I corrected them. That is why they must eat the bitter fruit of their own way. They must experience the full terror of the path they have chosen. For they are simpletons who turn away from me to death. They are fools, and their own complacency will destroy them. But all who listen to me will live in peace and safety, unafraid of harm. Now, you notice any differences between the two renditions? Okay, now, other than that, yeah. Very, very little, but yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I didn't notice so much, but there's one other thing I did notice that I want to say, that a lot of times most people will say, oh, they're not going to make it, they're not that bright, or they're stubborn, or on and on, and they lock you in right away is how they see you. Whereas this is not doing that. It's calling out to simple, saying, you don't have to be this way, you don't have to remain this way. I'm calling to you, you can listen and not be that way.
Yeah.
But if you persist, you will be that way.
Yes.
So it's not like, well, you're not bright, so well.
It kind of, what it reminds me of? There's that saying, first you will not, then you cannot. First you will not, then you cannot. And it kind of is like, the longer we remain in a negative state, the longer we remain in darkness, the more the darkness overcomes and becomes a part of us. And it's true. If you end up living in a certain lifestyle that you know is not wise, in fact, you know it's just wrong, the longer you stay there, the more you make excuses for yourself to justify that, and the more it becomes a part of you. And that's the dangerous thing, because when it becomes a part of you, it makes it hard to choose the right thing. It becomes harder and harder to choose right. And so in the end, you say, well, I'll just wait until then, and I'll make wise choices. I'll just get through this year. I'll just. But the thing is that when that time comes, you're so deep and it's so much a part of you that you can't.
When you follow your parents.
Yeah. That's true. Well, I think we've all been there, and I think there's nobody here that can say that I'm characteristically always wise. It's a part of growth, and as we grow morally and spiritually and socially, then if we are truly making progress, then our wisdom should increase. But it's not guaranteed to happen. I think one thing that comes out here is that, and that's the reason that I talked about the ants first. The ants don't have no role. The ants aren't given a choice. They must behave a certain way. It's part of their program. Now, what if an ant is mentally retarded and fails to follow protocol? What happens to them? In the insect world, there is no kindness. In the insect world, if you misbehave, they will torture and kill you. Or torture or kill, because I've seen both. But that's what happens. They absolutely do not tolerate deviance. Okay, it's not like in our world where we have all kinds of freedoms. They don't have those freedoms. All right. Now that's the difference. Wisdom for us it's available, and we have a basic structure, but we're not compelled to follow it. We're not forced to follow it. We have the option. Now, the question here is Lady Wisdom God? Because when I first took a Bible as a literature course, when we talked about the book of Proverbs, one of the questions that was asked was, well, what is that God talking? Is Lady Wisdom God? Yeah. Comes from God, okay. What's that?
Wisdom was created by God with the first of his works.
Okay. Okay, very good. It's created by God with the first of his works. I believe you're right, yes?
It doesn't sound like God's word to me, especially after near the end of the verses where it says you were bad. So I would see God saying, I pity you because you did not do the right thing, and I feel bad that you will have to pay the price.
Yeah, I was wondering if someone's going to pick. Yeah, that's one reason I throw this out there. You look at the end part and you go, wait a minute. Does that sound like Jesus? Well, because you didn't listen to wisdom, well, phooey on you. If you come to calamity, ha, ha, ha. I just have a hard time imagining Jesus going, ha, 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 because you're in a hole. Okay? That just doesn't sound like him. So where did that come from? All right. Here's how I would respond to that. Wisdom, as you mentioned, and I agree, was created by God. It is a part of the cosmos. It is a part of, and what is it for? Well, again, if wisdom is doing behaviors that will better my future or the future of my family or the future of my species or my colony, then wisdom it's a survival thing. But for humans, it's not just about survival. It's about fulfillment. We want to live. Yes, we want to survive, but we also want to experience fulfillment. We have these big prefrontal cortices that want to experience fulfillment. Okay? We want to have enough love, enough purpose, enough freedom, enough respect, enough fun. We want to experience a fulfilling life. If we live wisely, the probability of achieving that is much higher. Okay? It doesn't mean we'll have no problems, but if we live wisely, it's pretty much guaranteed we'll get enough. God promises that. Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness. All these things will be added to you. You'll get enough. Okay? If we do that. It's an option, though. It's an option. It's part of maturity. It's part of maturity. Now, wisdom is a subset of God. It's a part. It's created. It is created for our benefit. And as a thing, and I think what this verse describes, because it's not meant to be taken literally, there is no woman called Lady Wisdom. Okay, the Bible doesn't teach that there's a big lady with something in her hand saying, here I am, Lady Wisdom. No, it's a metaphor, okay? It's a metaphor. And so it's describing an impersonal force. It's an impersonal rule. That's what wisdom is. It's impersonal. Look, you mess up here, consequences, including death. You know anybody that's died behaving unwisely? Has that ever happened? Darwin Awards. Yeah, exactly. Yes. That's precisely. You hit the nail on the head. Nothing is more humiliating than suffering calamity because of your own stupid behaviors. Okay? Now, a friend of mine, father's in the hospital right now with a heart attack. And doctor says, so any smoking? You ever smoke? Nope. Any problems with cholesterol? Nope. High blood pressure? Nope. He lied on all 3 cases. The guy smoked like a chimney since he was 13. All right? But he quit a couple years ago. The guy's 70 years old. He quit a couple years ago, and so he said, well, it doesn't count anymore because, and I don't have cholesterol problems because I take my medicine. Same thing with high blood pressure. Yeah, and the thing is that why did he lie? It's the humiliation. I did this to me. I did this to me. And that's humiliating. It's really, and wisdom is saying, look, that's how wisdom is. If you break the rules, this is what you get. Wisdom doesn't care. Wisdom doesn't care. It's not a person. That's the point. There are rules. You break them, there are consequences. We live in a universe of cause and effect. Okay? Now, as children, and I mentioned this before, and I hate to keep bringing it up, but it's so important to remember, and our culture is so stupid. Because look, the human brain, we now understand, children need authoritarian parenting styles. They need a parent to say, you must do this, and you must not do this. Or the consequences are, I'm going to be the worst consequence that you're going to worry about, okay? They needed that. Baby boomers, for the most part, got that. Our children did not. That's one of the reasons we have the problems that we have today. When you teach a child from the ages of 0 to 4 or 5, when you are there to provide that appropriate discipline and to give responsibilities, and you make that kid conform, it develops the anterior prefrontal cortex. It literally develops a part of their brain that they're going to need. And what happens when that's not there? ADHD. We know now that 50% of attention deficit disorder is caused by parenting. They thought they were loving the kid. They thought they were doing a good job. It's not that they purposely abused their child. They did not. They just went with the flow. Okay? But what happens if you get stuck? If you get stuck with a strong-willed child and you do this permissive parenting thing, give them timeouts or whatever like that, that it's not strong enough, and the child is not compelled to behave a certain way, then the anterior PFC doesn't develop appropriately, and their capacity for self-control is dropped substantially. Okay? It affected the rest of their lives. We need to know. We are designed to live in a cause and effect universe, and our brains are hungry to know what the rules are early on. That was supposed to be the parent's job. And our society has said that's bad. Well, our society has gone counter to wisdom, and now we're looking at the consequences. Yeah?
Is there any way they can turn that around?
I get asked that every week because now I have them. Now these kids are grown up, and now they come and I get their history, and I figure out, well, this is what happened. It's not that difficult. I mean, it happens so often, and that's what they ask me. My parents did this to me. How do I turn it around? You can try. I mean, there are things you can do to stimulate that brain, but it's going to be harder now. I mean, we can turn it around a little bit, but you will never get back what you lost entirely. You'll never go back to what could have happened. We can't do that. But you can get some improvement. There are exercises you can do, but you got to do things you don't want to do. You have to force yourself and try and stimulate it that way, because you still can do something. It's not completely hopeless. It's not, but it's going to be harder than it would have been if we could just go back in time and undo some of this stuff. Okay. All right. Yeah.
So that means, like the Amish, they claim they don't have any ADHD in that.
They have very low amounts. Yeah, they have very low amounts. Nothing like what you see. Nothing like you see in the general pop. Oh my, yeah, that's absolutely true. Not just Amish, but any culture where you still have authoritarian parenting style. So yeah, it's in the West. The West, we have an epidemic because of our very unwise ideas, as we thought we could. I mean, for thousands of years, we've raised our children this way. All right. Morality is a part of intelligence. Morality is a part of intelligence. It's part of the fabric of wisdom. Now, God doesn't force us to behave wisely. We're not like ants, where we have no choice. But what he did was he gave us 5 moral edicts that are genetically encoded. Every single culture has these. There's no, you can't find a group of people anywhere in the world where they don't recognize these 5 tenets. Now, again, it doesn't mean that we live according to them necessarily ourselves. But when somebody else violates one of these rules, we're very quick to recognize when they do it. Okay, so even if we ourselves have antisocial personality disorder and break all 5 of them, if somebody else does it, we're on them in a minute. Hey, that wasn't very fair, or you didn't respect me like you should have. Every single culture has these. There's no, you can't find a group of people anywhere in the world where they don't recognize these 5 tenets. Now, again, it doesn't mean that we live according to them necessarily ourselves, but when somebody else violates one of these rules, we're very quick to recognize when they do it. Okay, so even if we ourselves have antisocial personality disorder and break all 5 of them, if somebody else does it, we're on them in a minute. Hey, that wasn't very fair, or you didn't respect me like you should have. Now, remember again, this is going way back when I first started talking about wisdom. Remember type 1 and type 2 processing? Okay, yeah, there are 2, in solving problems, there are 2 types of cognition, 2 types of thinking. Type 1 is autonomous. Type 1 is the gestalt. We're presented with a scenario or a situation, and we go by our feelings. And based on our general understanding of the circumstances, we give our prejudiced opinion, and it just comes out automatically. Now, sometimes that's good. If you have a conviction about something, do cats eat mice in general? Well, yeah, I think I have enough data to say absolutely I've seen it happen. Okay. Yes, the answer is yes. And you're going to have a hard time convincing me otherwise, because I know this to be true. That's kind of a conviction, okay? It's actually part of reality. Okay, I use type 1 for that. I don't have to go, well, let me do an experiment. Don't have to do the experiment because I have enough evidence. Now, there are times, now just because a person has a degree doesn't mean that they behave wisely, even in their own field. I had a friend, for example, went to the hospital and, thought she had cancer, okay? And, so makes it all the way to the specialist, the oncologist. Oncologist comes out, doesn't do any tests, takes a look at her and says, you don't have cancer. How do you know that? Well, because people who have cancer are very skinny and they look really sick. That'll be $65, please. All right. Now, yeah, that was her response. Yeah, that's without taking any blood, no x-rays, just I gave you the symptoms and you said no and kicked me out with, you're not skinny enough to have cancer? Really? Now, type 2 processing is where we think about. Type 1 is where, you just come up with an emotional response based on things that are like each other. It's a gestalt. Type 2 processing takes mental energy. It requires processing. It requires thinking and calculation. Remember that question I asked a while back? If a bat and a ball together cost $1.10 and the bat costs $1 more than the ball, how much is the ball? Most people say 5 cents. Well, it's actually an algebraic. If you think about it and write it down, you realize that's an algebra question. It's not simple math. But our brain automatically interprets it as simple math. Okay, that's because we use type 1 like that, when we should be using type 2 sometimes. Okay, part of wisdom is recognizing when to use type 2 processing. And that particular doctor didn't use any type 2. She jumped to type 1 and just irritated her patient. All right? It's very important to know when to use type 1 and when to use type 2. Okay. Now, when it comes to wisdom, as a soldier, you can be very strong, but success on the battlefield doesn't depend on strength. It depends on courage, discipline, technique, imagination, sensitivity. There are many things that go into being a good soldier. In the same way, a thinker may be very smart, but in order to succeed in life, in terms of experiencing fulfillment and even being successful professionally, you need to have some wisdom. Okay? When I was in graduate school, back in the 80s, I remember there was one particular guy in my biochemistry class, and he was basically going to prove that he was basically out to prove that God had nothing to do with creation. He was just this hyper evangelical atheist, just like he was just gun ho on this. Well, the problem is that he also suffered from a personality disorder. He was incredibly narcissistic. Now, he was a bright guy, but his narcissism got him kicked out of the program. All right? You can't, living wisely means living circumspectfully. It means thinking before you speak, calculating appropriately, knowing when to give a prejudiced opinion and when to hold back and gather more information. All right? Now I'm going to talk about some of those things, and I'm just going to run through some of them very quickly. All right. So what are the elements that make up wisdom? Now, this is from, if you just go to the books, and there are a number of sources that I gathered this from, but this is kind of what the summation is. What is involved in doing sufficient type 2 processing? Okay. One tendency is to collect information before making up one's mind. It's important to know, when do I need more information? When do I have enough? How much information do you need before something is a belief, a strong belief, or a conviction? And one of the reasons that when we talked about those 10 questions about the challenges of evangelical atheism is it's important for us, and when we talked about the shroud thing, the strength of the evidence for the resurrection is incredible. The strength of the evidence for humans having a spirit, that whole life after death thing. Those two things right there, if those are valid, and the evidence is overwhelming, but if you think about this overwhelming evidence, that we have evidence for a spirit, evidence that Jesus rose from the dead, not just a little evidence, but a lot of evidence. If I take those to be true, then what does that say about all of life? What does that say about the reality of God? What does that say about, the Bible? And, should I be following this or not? Does God really have the ability to make this inspired? I mean, can I really take this seriously? If Jesus rose from the dead, that would suggest that I can. I mean, I'm leaping a little bit here, but it just seems like that might flow together. Yeah.
I like attendance.
Comment or question over here? I thought I saw it. Okay. All right. Why don't we stop here? But just in summary, wisdom is not a small topic. It's huge. It embraces a lot of things. But at its heart, it does involve how we think. Knowing when to go with our gestalt and when to come up with a calculated answer. When to calculate our answers. Also, it is a choice. We will always have a choice. I mentioned many times that we come to, whether we're good or bad, every day we come to this fork in the road. We have the option to do the easy thing or the good thing, the easy thing or the wise thing. And every time we make the wise choice, we're writing the book of who we are. Okay, when people say, "Well, your parents did this to you," and that's why this whole case down in Florida. Well, because her father molested her, she used chloroform and killed her 3-year-old. But it's like that, or she drowned the baby in the pool, or whatever. I forgot. I think she sounds like she chloroformed the kid. What's her name? Casey Anthony. Casey, exactly. For whatever reason, there is once you get to a certain age, you write the story of your life by the choices that you make. If we continually to make foolish choices, we turn into fools. Okay? And it's important to recognize the part of us that is still fool. Because as part of growing, we all have a piece of that in us. We go for what's in front of us at the expense of something more valuable. And then we pay the price. But it's okay, because God, the whole God, not just the wisdom part, but the whole part of God says, I am not going to laugh at you. I'm a person. I'm not an impersonal force. Yes, wisdom is cruel. That's the way the universe is. But I still love you. And when you wake up tomorrow, you have a chance to start over again. And we can do this better. You can learn from this. And it's a good thing to learn. Okay? You have a comment?
One of the verses that you showed the second half of it talked about complacency.
Yes.
And really, it's not wise to be a person that's not willing to change.
It's not, well, that's absolutely true, yeah.
Changing, you're not growing.
If you're not changing, you're not growing. It's not wise to be a person who doesn't change. You're absolutely right on that. You're absolutely right. Now, there are some things that you don't want to change, the good stuff, but when it comes to the lazy stuff, when it comes to all the type 1, so many people, they get themselves in a hole because they just get stuck in type 1. They stopped learning when they got out of high school. And they plopped down in front of a TV, and then they went to work day after day, and they never grew beyond that point. And then they come in complaining, "I'm depressed." What do you do all day? I watch TV and collect a check, and that's all they do. And their brain is just atrophying away. And you give them suggestions. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And then how am I supposed to help with that? What am I supposed to do? These aren't magic beans that we don't have anything like that. You got to do something. You have to obey. You have to listen. And it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay. And that's the beautiful thing about the real God. He's not just some cold wisdom thing. He is love and says, learn. It's okay.